Ken Murray was the first one to begin the children's matinee series, although I wasn't always happy with what I saw in the quality of the production.
When K. Gordon Murray presents Little Red Riding Hood and the Monsters.
I was currently working for United Artists Theater Circuit Scores Theaters in New York. At one point, I became involved in the advertising for the Scores Theater chain. I was divorced and had 2 young children, and I spent Saturdays with them and was always looking for some place to take them on a Saturday matinee, and that was how I first became aware of really the matinee business. The first film that I got involved with was The Seven Dwarfs to the Rescue, which was brought to me by a film distributor who thought it might be of interest to me because I had let people know of my interest in starting a company to do the children's matinee business, and hopefully with a higher quality than what had been done in the past. The first film actually was not made as a children's film. It was The Seven Dwarfs to the Rescue, but it was an Italian film that had a lot of other undercurrent in it. When I saw it in Italian, I had no idea what the dialogue was that was going on, but I saw the film as a sequel to The Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and I made a deal to buy the film and started Childhood Productions. That was our first film. I went over to Italy and dubbed it. The translators who were doing the work for me said, well, that's not what they're saying. I said, I don't care what they're saying. This is what I want them to say. So we really kind of remade the film and brought it back, and with a heavy television advertising campaign, we opened as our first film for our distribution company, and it was an immediate success. I then went back to Germany and spent some time there because all of the Grimm fairy tales had been made there in live action rather than the animation that they had been done for some of the same stories here.
Sleeping Beauty comes to life with real live actors. The all-time favorite fairy tale bursts upon the screen in storybook color.
We then started to dub them, but we were looking to have, somewhat of a higher quality, and so we had all new original music scores written for the film. Also brought in Paul Tripp as our narrator.
I tell you something. When we're finished with this tree, it's going to be the most beautiful tree in the whole wide world. Careful now, first one to drop one's a monkey.
Paul was one of the chief children's personalities in television, starting from Mr. Imagination, which was a very successful show, and then on to Birthday House, which he was doing at that time.
Come on in, Ruth.
He and Sonny Fox were 2 of the major people in children's television.
Now stay out and don't come back.
Through our relationship with Paul, both as an advertiser on his show and as a narrator for our films, Paul suggested that we might want to do a story that he had written originally for Mr. Imagination as an all-new children's film produced by ourselves. Of course, that was an exciting idea to me. None of the children's matinee films that had been used up to this point had ever been produced specifically for that market. So we decided to take what was originally a half-hour Mr. Imagination and make it into the Christmas that almost wasn't. It was written as a full-length feature story by Paul. We then decided, of course, that the costs were too expensive for us to produce it here, so we went to produce it in Italy. And that started a whole new experience for us.
There once was a Christmas that almost wasn't, almost wasn't, almost wasn't. There once was a Christmas that almost wasn't because of a man named Prune. Now, I
had originally thought of doing it there with a co-producer, an Italian co-producer, and someone who I had met and known through my experience of dubbing a number of films by that time in Rome. Well, the first problem that we ran into was upon our arrival there and getting ready to start, I met the director that was to be supplied by our Italian co-producer. And the first thing he said was that he wanted to make some changes in the script because he felt that we should have a love interest. There should be a love interest for Santa Claus.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
And I immediately knew that we would have a problem, and this was not the director for us. And
He's not in. But he's not in.
Well,
I said he's not in.
why isn't he in?
Because he's out.
we broke off with the producer and the director, and it was now up to me to put the whole thing together there. Luckily, I had a friend who was an Italian actor, and he said, you know, a wonderful Mrs. Santa would be Lydia Brazzi, Rosanna Brazzi's wife.
Dragging Mr. Whipple up to the North Pole without so much as a fur coat?
But, Mother,
Oh, I declare you men are all children.
And that sounded fine. She had just made a very successful film, and her appearance was absolutely perfect for Mrs. Santa Claus. So we sent the script over because the Brazzis were friends of my friends, and made an appointment to have dinner with Rosanna and Lydia to discuss her appearing. Of course, I still had no director yet. But we went and we had dinner, and Rosanna had read the script as well, and Lydia loved it, and she was happy to do it. And Rosanna was telling me all the things he thought about the script. Rosanna, of course, was known as the star of films like South Pacific and The Barefoot Contessa and, so many films. And I made an appointment with him to come have breakfast with me the next day with this idea that I'd gotten in my mind at that point. And at breakfast, I asked Rosanna, I know you've never directed a film, you've starred in many. How would you like to play the villain and direct The Christmas That Almost Wasn't? And he said he'd love to. So it, along with everything else, became the first film that Rosanna Brazzi directed.
You sit and you meditate. The clock you investigate. You're starting to twitch with a wandering itch. What else can you do when you wait?
It was strange because he was known as the great Italian lover, and here he was going to play Mr. Prune, the terrible villain who wanted to stop Christmas, as well as directing his first film.
And now victory's mine. Do you hear that? Victory's mine. 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 A Merry Christmas, I don't think.
And basically, we went on from there, and that was how the
Phineas
film
T,
started.
that is, Prune.
We shot it in two studios. Cinecittà, which is the main film studio in Italy, that's where all the major Italian films were made, was what we used for all of our settings.
Come on, Santa, let's go to work.
Our cameraman had his own studio that we used for some of the smaller internal scenes. All the sets that were in the studios, the store, the department store, all of those things, Santa's home and everything, those were all sets that we constructed. The outdoor scenes, there was a little old village about, an hour from Rome.
It must just snow today.
When you see the children running from all over to bring their piggy banks to Santa Claus and all, those scenes were shot in the town. Actually, one of the things that we thought would be difficult, Santa's workshop, we had to have elves. Well, of course, elves were beyond our ability, but we were able to find an acting community of little men who appear in the film as Santa's helpers.
Well, I declare.
We did find one interesting factor. We had to get reindeer for Santa's sleigh. We had live reindeer that we needed, and finding reindeer in Italy was not easy. Santa has 8 of them. We finally found 4 at the Milan Zoo, and the Milan Zoo allowed them to come down to Rome to be in the film. And we figured we could shoot from 2 different angles and get 8 that way. But when we got to the studio, the first thing that happened is we found it was during the summer that reindeer shed their horns. So the next thing we had to do is have the prop department make horns for the reindeer, which was a job, but that got done. and then they had to be put on the little stubs that they had. I, at least, didn't realize that Lydia was a great animal lover, and she thought that it was very cruel to do this.
Christmas is coming.
Although we had the zookeeper with us to make sure that everything we did was all right, when we were in the midst of shooting our scene, in came Lydia with the police. She had wanted us arrested for cruelty to animals. Well, we had to stop shooting and explain the whole thing, because Lydia wanted both myself as the producer and her husband, for directing it, arrested for cruelty. We finally explained enough and had the zookeeper there to explain that there was no cruelty going on, and we were able to go on with the shooting. I have no idea what Rosano said to his wife Lydia that night, but that was the end of that problem. Our original idea, even though a number of our actors were Italian, all of our major actors spoke English quite well. Rosano, of course, who's starred in many English films, his wife Lydia. We also had Misha Auer, who was a starred in many films, who played Santa's assistant.
The song is Prune. Prune, 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 spoon, moon, June, prune, 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 spoon.
Lemon?
No, prune.
Actually, the only one who did speak English but was not known here too well was Alberto Rabagliati, who was a famous film star and singer there who played Santa Claus.
Look, your throne has come. You'd better practice before the kids come rushing in.
But our feelings were that we would shoot the film in live sound and then just dub it into Italian afterwards. But we found out that at that point, nobody shot films with live sound in Italy. Everything was normally that was made there. It was an Italian, German, French co-production. And they would have stars from each of the countries in the film. And everybody spoke their own language. So one person would be speaking in German, one in French, one in Italian. And the stagehands and crew, would just go about what they were doing and not have any consideration of noise, because none of that was recorded. Afterwards, it was post-synced in all three different languages. So they were not accustomed to shooting with live sound. So we did it and had to do it on the basis of trying to, with almost all of the cast speaking in English, but we post-synced it after the completion. And all of the sound studios and the rest that we used were at International Recording, which again was the major sound studio in Rome. That's where we had done our dubbing as well of the earlier films that I was involved with. A lot of the actors who were there were a little uncomfortable doing the post-syncing. It's done in loops with just like one sentence at a time. Sometimes they had difficulty in syncing with the film that they were looking at. And Misha Auer, who had absolutely no ability to sing, every time he finished would turn around with his finger on his nose and say, "I got it right on the nose, didn't I, Barry?" And of course, I'd say, "Misha, it was fine, but we'll do it once more." Paul had the musical director who had worked with him for many years, Ray Carter, who wrote the songs with him. And there was a orchestrator, musical director, Bruno Nicolai, who did many, many films. He ended up taking the basis for the music and writing it as the rest of the background score, and then he conducted it with members of the orchestra from the Rome Opera. And then, of course, that's all put together in the mix along with the dubbing track.